And we are back in a significant development impacting workers across New York State. The Department of Labor announcing an increase in the minimum wage. Here now to share more is the author and employment law attorney, Stephen Mitchell-Sack. And Stephen, thank you so much for being with us. As we take a look right now, we understand that New York is going to see an increase in the minimum wage. How is this looking pretty much for those who are working behind the scenes here?
Good morning, Darren. It's
Good morning.
wonderful. I mean, they're improving their hourly rate. It's now $16 an hour, everybody. So make sure you're aware of that and make sure that you get paid properly.
And when we talk about the $16 an hour, this has been a long time coming. We know that the governor had talked about seeing this happen. Legislators talked about seeing this happen. How powerful is this, given the fact that although it may be a dollar, it still means a lot to so many more people?
Well, not only that, if you work more than 40 hours a week, that dollar becomes $1.50 for every hour that you work over 40 hours in a given week, Darren. Also, if you are making the minimum wage and you work more than 10 hours in any given day, you are entitled to an additional 1 hour of pay, even if you work 1 minute. So that's another $16. We call that spread of hours. It's very important for our viewers to understand if you're an hourly worker, make sure the company pays you weekly and gives you a wage statement. Because if they don't, which indicates the wage statement has to indicate your rate of pay, how much money you got each week, how many hours you work, there are penalties, significant penalties under New York state law. So there's a lot of things that I want our viewers to be, aware of.
I also want to be able to tackle for a moment what happens for those persons that are receiving tips. We know that there's some legislation that really deals with those who receive tips.
Well, the tip sharing is, if you work in a restaurant, do not allow the restaurant to share your tips with the cooks. It's only for the wait staff. That's very important. And there's just so many different rules. I have cases where I represent employees, workers who are not paid weekly. Believe it or not, if you're not paid once a week, if you're paid once every 2 weeks, that violates the law and you have a valid claim. So, people really have to know their rights, especially people that are working now at minimum wage, which is now again $16 an hour.
And we know now the wage increase is in effect. But what for an employee is if they're in a situation where I'm working my job, I've yet to see the minimum wage increase hit in my own paycheck? What repercussions do they have?
If the employer doesn't give you the proper wage,
Yes, sir.
oh boy, there's liquidated damages, there's attorney's fees. People should run to a lawyer. Don't walk, run. They can call me anytime. My number is 917-371-8000, and I will give you advice. I'm not going to charge you. I'll tell you what rights you have. People can then decide whether they want to contact the Department of Labor and file a claim, whether they want to hire a lawyer to do that. If they have a discrimination case, maybe they're being underpaid on the basis of their race, right? Maybe minorities are not getting the correct rate of pay compared to similarly situated white workers. Well, you may have a claim there. You can file a charge with the New York State Division of Human Rights, the EEOC, or the New York City Human Rights Commission. And of course, Darren, you always talk about if you're fired. I have a new book out called Fired. It's hard to see holding it up. But in any event, I want our viewers to know that if anyone gets fired and they're not offered severance pay, that's another area that they can address because every firing is negotiable.
Yeah. And for home care aides and those persons, this law also has impact as well. Can you walk us through a little bit about home care aides that are going to be impacted
Sure.
with this new legislation?
Well, home care aides have their unique set of circumstances and facts. Suppose you're required to stay on the job to care for somebody that's sick for 24 hours, and maybe part of your time is when the person is napping, or you have to stay there at night, and you're not allowed to go home because you got to work there. You're going to get paid 24 hours. I had several cases in the past year where I represented nannies and home workers, and we were able to we demanded and received additional pay for time that we were spent there because we couldn't go home. A lot of benefits of being a home worker. Check with, maybe you were hired by an agency, or maybe you don't know your rights. Speak to somebody about that because you have rights to enforce.
Yeah. While we talk about the fact that workers themselves will see that increase, what does it mean for the employer, for the business, having this increase and having to deal with that?
Well, they'll always gripe, right? But we think that hiring more incentivized workers, more productive workers, will only accelerate profitability for the employer. Yeah, they may have to cut their costs in other areas, but isn't making satisfied workers the most important thing that an employer should be aware of? I mean, really. I mean, $16 an hour is not earth shattering, but it's well deserved. And hopefully, over the next few years, it'll even be higher. It'll grow to like the low 20s. But for now, we have to be happy with what we got. And the bottom line is, it's not just $16 an hour, like I said. If you work overtime, then it's an hour and a half more because you have to multiply the $16 times 1.5 times your average hourly rate if you're working more than 40 hours. If you work more than 10 hours in a given day, you're entitled to another hour of pay, and the employer is obligated to give you a wage statement which notifies you of the rate of pay, the hours that you're being paid, and they can't skimp on that. Or they're liable for significant damages, liquidated damages, and attorney's fees under the New York labor law.
Looking at a state like New York and knowing that this legislation is now in effect, what else can we anticipate going across maybe several other states nationwide?
Well, I will tell you this: New York is leading the states in terms of minimum wage, but we're also looking at areas that I'm hopeful will be the law will be changed. Recently, a law was vetoed in New York State just the last month, where it would have eliminated a restrictive covenants, covenants not to compete, covenants not to solicit. In California, for example, and other states, any type of restrictive covenant which restricts a person's ability to earn a living, right, is illegal. New York is very close to enacting legislation to get rid of that. Hopefully, that will happen in the near term.
So, as we look and talk about the near term, this was a long time coming. Give us some background as to how long this has been in the pipeline before this legislation actually took effect.
Wow. Well, there's been, increases over time. If I remember, like 10 years ago, it was $7.50 an hour. And then it went to 9, and then it went to 11, and then 13. So this is the culmination of an attempt to improve people's lives by paying them more money for their wages. It's a long time coming. It's progress. Hopefully, there'll be more increases. Maybe if we have continued inflation, people that don't work for, let's say, that are not union workers under collective bargaining agreements, which automatically sometimes get cost of living increases, right? Depending on inflation. I know Social Security recipients this year in 2024 are getting another like 3.8% in their Social Security benefits. I mean, it's just life. Things are getting more expensive. People need more money to pay their bills, and this is just a fabulous improvement in that.
Let me tie into a little bit about your book that you lifted up just a few minutes ago. Say, for instance, an employee works for a company. That employer can't maintain the $16 an hour, decides they want to terminate. What repercussions do you have? Where do you go from there, according to Stephen Mitchell Sack?
Thank you. Well, if you've been at a company for a long time and you're fired through no fault of your own, like you're not fired for punching somebody out or drinking on the job. You're fired for a job elimination because the employer can't afford you, right? Um, Even if you were there a long time and didn't do anything wrong, I would strongly urge everybody to request a meeting with your supervisor, with the owner of the company, and demand some severance pay. Maybe you should get, 2 weeks per year, especially if you've been there for more than 10 years. Continued Cobra, which is medical benefits, but paid by the ex-employer, not for you to pay for it, but paid by the employer. Outplacement, job, which can help you with job assistance. If you're fired right before an expected bonus, or you're getting close to a pension or profit sharing plan, Darren, don't allow the company to just unilaterally terminate you. You must demand in a negotiation additional benefits. Remember, every firing is negotiable. I do this like 800 times a year. More often than not, I'm successful in getting more money for clients. So if you're terminated through no fault of your own, and you've been at the company more than a few years, I would strongly urge you to consider requesting a meeting and trying to get a better package.
Somebody else asked the question: what about if you're a part-time employee and you're terminated? What is the grounds for a package there?
Probably not great. Obviously, you want to make sure you get all your accrued vacation time and any monies, wages that you're owed through the termination. But part-time workers don't have the strength to negotiate like long-term employees are. So I would say, candidly, that it's not really going to be a fruitful endeavor.
Yeah, a lot of information we gave out here. Stephen Mitchell Sack, thank you so much for being with us. And as we talk about the minimum wage increase affecting here in New York and also in the suburbs. Thanks a lot. For more information
Well,
now.
if I could just say one more time, Darren, if people want to call me, 917-371-8000. There's no charge. If they want to send me an email, Stephen Sack, atty@hotmail.com. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephen. You just took my job from me. For more information, visit the website at theemployeeslawyer.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more Open coming up right after this.